Welcome, and again, this week you're with the Lux Bride. We decided to play up the Halloween theme because Halloween is this Saturday. And so today we brought our black attire to get a little dark, and we're going to be talking about some spooky wedding stories. A little horrific, a little funny, a little spooky, a little scary, all of the above. And Stephanie is going to begin with her first story right now.
So my story is actually a little bit of a confusing one. So it's a little bit comical because I think I was threatened, but I also don't think I was threatened. So I'll let you all decide. So I was at a wedding and I was over talking to the DJ because there was nothing that I could help with at that point. The couple they were trying to have a surprise slideshow, and so they were having difficulty setting up a projector and figuring out what to do with it, and nothing that the DJ or I could ever help with. We didn't know any of that equipment, so we were standing there kind of watching because it was a comical experience. And during that time, a woman who had had definitely a couple of drinks was trying to dance with all of them, and because it was happening on the dance floor, and the people who were trying to set it up were like, yeah, we can't dance right now. We're working on this. We're trying to not do that right now. We don't want to draw attention to the dance floor. So this woman came over to us, the DJ and myself. And granted, I had photographed her now 4 or 5 times. The only time I had talked to the DJ, being for that long of a time period, was during this part of the day. So she came over and she introduced herself and she went, "Hi, Mr. DJ. Hi, Mrs. DJ." And I was like, okay, great. We're starting off interesting. So she then proceeded to talk to the DJ, and she kept going on with, "I really want to dance." And he went, "That's great. I can't do that right now because they're trying to set this up. We're trying not to draw attention to the dance floor." He went through his whole thing. And she went, "Well, but you need to play music, otherwise I'm leaving." And he went, "There's music still playing right now. And again, if you give us about 5 minutes, there will be music playing." And so I was just not really paying attention to this interaction because it had nothing to do with me. But she looked over at me, and I do pardon the people who are going to be on the podcast for this when they're not going to see the video interaction. But imagine somebody holding up a little camera and pretending to click it. That's what she did. She went, "Okay, well, you," pointing at me, "you need to make sure that you capture this." And then she just walked away. But she did it in a way that was, "You need to capture this." And I went, "I don't know what I'm capturing. I missed the part of what I'm capturing." And so it was that kind of really confusing experience of, we both looked at each other and we're like, it felt like we got slightly threatened in that she's going to leave and or we need to capture something, but we don't know what was happening.
What's happening right now? I don't even know.
Yeah. And it's not often that you have an interaction where you both look at each other and go, "Did you understand what just happened? No. Did you? No. Are we okay here?" Yes. But she definitely looked over at one point, 3 minutes later. They were figuring out the slideshow, and she looked at both of us and just pointed her own fingers at her own eyes and looked at us. And we were like, "Oh."
That's the threat, I think.
That's the threat. Yeah, and we were like, what are we supposed to do right now? The slideshow, they have their own thing that they have to do. Anyways, it all ended up working out, but you guys can decide if that was a threat or not. We still don't know. We didn't it wasn't a scary situation necessarily, but it was a very confusing one.
Yeah, I think it's the eye thing.
Yes, I think it was that.
Taking your fingers and holding up, "I see you."
Yeah.
When you point your fingers at your eyes and then at the other person's eyes, it's like, you. I'm talking to you.
Right.
That is definitely the threat.
Okay, cool, yeah. And yeah, again, we both just looked
My
opinion. We would love to do whatever, where we're ready to serve, we just don't know how right now.
It's funny that she also did to both of you because she had both of her 2 fingers at her eyes and then both at you two, both of you.
Yeah.
Not even one of you. You're like, "Oh, what did I do?"
Right. Yeah, she definitely thought that we were like a cohorted team against her. And we were like, oh, we're not though, ma'am.
We're separate entities of vendors that are here representing different
And we would love to help you. And there's a boundary of when we can help you.
Oh yeah. I think that's a good one.
Yeah. So that's a funny story for you, just to kind of start off. But okay, what story are you gonna go with? I'm interested.
Oh, my horror story is going to be in very related terms of COVID.
Oh.
Everybody's heard the word, everybody's heard all about it. It's been a nightmare in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to be talking about venues and vendors that just were like shut down until further notice. So like a bride and groom's worst nightmare of like, you paid this money, you're going to have your wedding. Oh, whoops, you can't. So to start that, one of my very specific brides, she's a sweetheart. Their wedding was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Her and I were supposed to, so she was getting stressed out anyway. So they were bringing me on. I was originally their florist, and then they were bringing me on as coordinator because they realized that they were feeling some stress and they needed some help, especially in times of craziness like COVID. You need some extra support. We all do. So her and I were supposed to go do a venue walkthrough, and she called me about 2 hours before our venue walkthrough was and was like, well, so I just got off the phone with my venue. And I go, okay, are we still doing our walkthrough? And she's like, funny story. Her funny story was that her venue advised her at that point in time, a few hours before her walkthrough, her final walkthrough, which is always about a month before your wedding. A month before her wedding, she gets a phone call. So about 45 days. So like a month and a week before her wedding, she gets a phone call from a vendor, well, one of their coordinators or somebody with the venue, saying, we are closed until further notice due to COVID. We will not be having any events inside. We will not be having any events outside. I don't even know if she got an answer, if she was going to get her deposit back that she'd already paid. She probably was already halfway paid up until that point.
Right.
And so not only is she having the fear of, oh my gosh, am I going to get my money back? It's like, oh my gosh, can I even have my wedding? So all of that. And she reached out to me immediately, you know, it was about an hour after the phone call. She probably had to make a few phone calls, you know, to the fiance or mom and just like be like, oh my God, what the heck do I do?
Right.
What do you do? And so she contacted me and I was just like, well, let's explore options here. It was like, okay, do you want to try to find a venue? Do you want to do it in a park? Do you want me to find you a pavilion? Do we need to rent a tent? Like, you going to have it in your yard? Like, what are all the possibilities? And let's dwindle it down to the option.
Right.
We found an amazing venue for her, really unique alternative. It wasn't booked because it's not normally a venue. She had a tent. It was beautiful. We got everything figured out. Her event was amazing. And I love that she said that her wedding was better than what she had originally planned it. That's like the ultimate goal as a vendor.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
But another hiccup for this poor bride who is she handled this craziness pretty well too. You know, I think it was very stressful, but I don't think she really let it get to her too much when working with us. Because, I mean, honestly, you could totally have a breakdown and it would be valid.
Right.
Totally valid. Cry it out, yell it out, whatever you need to. Do some kickboxing video classes because COVID.
No judgment.
Yeah.
No judgment.
Some wine needs to be had. The week of her wedding, on a Wednesday, her coordinator contacted her and said, hey, I was exposed to COVID. I can't marry you. So not only did she lose her venue a month and a week before, now she lost her officiant like 3 days before her wedding day. And yeah, this is like everybody's, like, this is the stuff that I think brides would literally have a nightmare about. And now after hearing the horror story, they're going to be having nightmares.
Yeah. Oh, so sorry.
But this is like totally real stuff. And so she contacted me like, so I have something to try to figure out. And I go, okay, what's going on? And she was like, well, my officiant just called me and said that they were exposed to COVID, so they don't think they can marry me. They're waiting on a test, but I don't know what that means. I'm like, well, it means they either have it or they don't. And we should probably figure something else out. And I half joking, but also half serious, because with COVID. Yes, I've said this like 5 times, the name COVID. Get used to it.
Mm.
I got my officiating certification. Wow, isn't that weird? Certification. Because of COVID, you can only have so many people. When it was only 10-person events, I'm like, well, why not be somebody's florist, coordinator, officiant? Throw it on my list, right? Throw on my list of many trades. And so I was like, well, worst case scenario, I have been ordained by the Universal Church of Life to be able to marry people. So, I can line up your bridal party and begin the walk by being your officiant if I need to. And she's like, I figured you would be something like that. And I loved her reaction because she's like, I figured it, like I knew you would have an answer, was what she was trying to say, but it was so funny. She found somebody else to marry her.
Okay.
I didn't need to walk her down the aisle because she knew I had many things to make sure went perfectly for her and seamless. So she knew I had a lot of tasks on my docket anyways, and she didn't want to throw that one on there too. But even through all that scariness and the horrificness and the curiosity that I'm sure that this couple had just trying to triumph to get to be married, they were able to be married. And a horrifying story turned out into just a unique story to tell their family and their kids to talk about for years to come. So that is my story.
That sounds like such like that typical, like almost like a rom-com story in which like
yeah. Oh, totally.
young couple just had like these awful things happen to them and they, a happy ending. I don't mind that.
Yeah, this is definitely like a Hallmark. I feel like this could be like a Hallmark wedding COVID story.
I feel like if Hallmark doesn't at least have like 5 COVID stories this year, then they're not doing things right.
Like love conquered all, but look at all this stuff they had to go through and all this craziness and chaoticness. Yeah, they had like all odds against them.
Yeah. Oh man.
And I can tell you that I've had multiple couples where this has happened to them this year. This is just like my one specific one, just like how everything lined up, just the timing of it all. But a lot of my couples, I think 4 or 5 of them had to reconfigure their venue like a month before.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So my next story is actually kind of like a compilation of stories. And it's nothing to do with COVID because I just want to say.
I just said it like 12 times.
Well, so mine actually has to do with vendors, and it has to do specifically with DJs. So I've had some very interesting experiences this year. And like, this year you knew was going to be crazy, right? What I didn't know is how, like the re-emphasis of how good of a DJ you have was just crazy this year because I had DJs who like, one of them interrupted the end of a ceremony because the couple did not do a stand ceremony. Like they just skipped it. And so instead of announcing their, like, or just playing their exit song, yeah, he got on the mic and he was like, oh, aren't you going to do the stand ceremony?
Why would you say that?
Like you just saw them kiss, the priest has announced them, like, let it go, honey, move on. And then I've had a DJ who he didn't take the time to figure out what the order of the bridal party was in. So he announced the wrong names. He firstly announced the wrong bridal party in general, like it was a different wedding. And then he announced the incorrect names in the wrong order. And you're like, okay. Thankfully, like the wedding party was, they'd been drinking quite a bit at that point, so they really didn't care. But people noticed.
Yeah.
And then there was like a different, yeah, like it's just crazy how many stories I have of this. But there was another time when a DJ, like the first dance was supposed to happen at 6:15. And the DJ had to transfer where he was from one tent to another tent because it was an all outdoor wedding. They had to change things. They had 2 tents, one for like dinner and sitting, and then one for dancing and drinks. So that way they could spread people out more. Well, he didn't transfer his stuff from the first one over to the second one. So 6:15 is when the first dances were supposed to be. He didn't transfer his items over as needed until 7 p.m. Which means that he wasn't ready to go until 7:15, which doesn't seem like a big deal until you're looking at constraints within like photography and videography timelines. And you're like, we got to go. We're not scheduled to be here until like 10 or 11 like you are, sir.
Yeah.
We need some dancing photos. And the couple was getting super anxious because they weren't dancing and they couldn't figure out why. And yeah, so anyways, that was chaotic. I'm just gonna keep going with the DJ stories because unfortunately I have a lot this year. But another DJ was rude to my couple, and I didn't know it at the time. Because my couples asked me to do like, sometimes I'm like, oh, don't worry, like I'll go talk to the DJ, let them know like you're ready to be announced in so they can come out, blah, blah, blah. Which it just kind of makes sense. Like the bridal party can stay outside all together. I can go in. I have to get set up anyways. I can tell the DJ to come out. Like logistically, that just makes sense. But this DJ was rude to my couple, and my couple changed their mind. They were going to do like one of those dollar dances and they decided not to. They just wanted like regular dancing to start. So they asked me not thinking anything of it. I was like, oh yeah, sure, I can do that. So I went over and talked to the DJ. He wasn't like, the most pleasant of human beings. He wasn't the worst. But I learned later that he was rude to my couple, which is why they didn't want to talk to him.
Oh.
I was like, oh, that sucks.
It's like, you're the one who paid him. Like,
yeah, like he's supposed to be nice to you. And but yeah, like another experience, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm telling this many stories at this point about just DJs. But like
add to it.
But like I had a different DJ play the wrong song for our first dance. And then he like stopped 30 seconds in and was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I played the wrong song. Ha ha ha.
I'm a screw up. Oh my god.
Kinds of like awkward interactions that are happening that guests notice because it's in front of everyone.
Yeah, it's public.
Like,
it's not quiet behind the scenes. It's very loud in public.
Yeah, it's very loud in public. It's not like, oh, Stephanie tripped over a rock and is now covered in mud and dirt. That would make sense, right? Hopefully nobody's seeing me doing that except for potentially like the wedding party. But that's fine. Like we'll work it out in life. But yeah, these are very public, very embarrassing moments that feel very cringy. And for me, that's like Halloween in general. Like those spooky kind of stories also kind of make me feel really cringy.
Yeah.
I just don't like it. I just don't like it.
Oh man, I think it was like a few years ago, but one of my weddings in Benton Harbor area, I had like a bridesmaid come to me and be like, hey, like, I had my husband with me. Sometimes he comes on job sites or tear down. It's nice to have him with me if a team member's not available because it's kind of weird tearing down at night by yourself alone. And so he came with me, and one of the gals was like, can I borrow him? And like pointed at my husband, and I was like, depends, like for what? What for? And she said that there was a DJ and he was like hitting on her and like kind of harassing her. And I'm like, yes, by all means, you may have my husband. And she like literally pretended to dance with him for just like a moment, and like DJ stopped like immediately. He didn't continue harassing her, but I think she was worried that, because we showed up right before the end of the night. We like to come up like 10-15 minutes before like the final song or last call and all that. We want everybody to take flowers home. But yeah, she like borrowed him for a moment because the DJ was so bad. He was hitting on her and wouldn't like stop, like wanting to like go home with her nastiness. Like that's just so unprofessional and so gross. So gross. Like, nah, you can ask for a number and then like stop it right there, bud. Like just stop. Yeah.
See, like right there, like I can feel like my chest like compressing in at the cringe.
Yeah, like disgusting.
Yeah.
Especially when a woman doesn't want to be harassed. Like, if I don't want you to continue to incessantly ask me if I want to go home with you, then you should probably stop.
Right.
Just stop.
And also, like you're in a professional setting, like you are on the job.
Yeah, I don't know if they were drinking and maybe that was enhanced. like that could have definitely influenced that incisiveness, but you shouldn't be doing that while working. Keep it professional. Yeah, I don't know the scenario completely. We left after we set up everything and did like a little transfer ceremony reception and left for, we went and had a long dinner and went back to tear down. So I don't know what happened in that moment of all that transpired there.
Oh man.
So,
Well, I mean, luckily, so like people don't know your husband, but he's such a good guy.
mm-hmm.
So
He's like a bear. Like he's just like, how do I describe it? He's gonna not like that I'm sharing this. Like he can be like big grizzly bear when he needs to be, but he's also like a teddy bear as well
yeah.
for those who are closest to him. So, you know, he can seem like a grizzly, but he's also be a softie when need be. And so when you need him to intimidate, he probably does the job. He's not a small man. He's not small or petite by any means. He's a very big, strong man, and I love him for it. But yeah.
That'd be such a
He'd
crazy.
be like a bouncer, and people be like, "Oh, I don't want to mess with him. Like, I'm not gonna fuck with that. Like, oh, I just want." We're gonna have to bleep that out, or I don't know if I can swear that. I'm sorry, guys. How should I not have said that? Should we just like
What this is though, sometimes this is what this is.
Yeah.
Did you want to go into another story of yours though? Because you have like several too.
I do. So I was gonna do the next one is at a winery, but I just realized like my own personal wedding, I kind of had like a horrifying situation.
Yeah, go for it.
But I don't want to make. Which one should I do?
Do your wedding one.
My wedding?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know the story. I want to know it.
So my wedding was a very interesting wedding. I mean, we had like all the things kind of working against us. Not COVID, because this was 6 years ago. We had cold, rainy weather. It was like 40 degrees outside. It was freezing and we were doing it in a tent. We had heaters, but the heaters weren't adequate or blowing enough heat around, or we had siding, but we had 3 of the 4 sides covered. We should have just got entire sidings to be completely enclosed. That was also our mistake. We should have just gotten siding all the way around. We listened to the rental company of leaving 3 of the 4 sides covered. They said we'd want one exposed so that when the wind hit it, it didn't completely like have too much stress or tension on it. Should have just gotten all the siding. That wasn't the horror part of the story though. So it was like, I think it was like 8 a.m. We woke up. I stayed the night at my parents' house, my whole family, you know, my parents, my brother's there. Aaron stayed at a hotel room. We'd never slept in like same rooms or anything like that. That's a little personal, but we never slept in same rooms until we were married. We were very appropriate about that. TMI. But yeah, okay. But TMI. We woke up that morning and my brother was throwing up. And so we thought it was because he had a concussion at the time. I'm sorry, Riley. I hope I have permission to share the story. Anyhow, that's my brother's thing. Anyhow, my brother woke up and he was throwing up, and we were worried it was something to do with his concussion. He was out of school in high school for a little bit because of his concussion. It was really bad. He was getting really bad migraines, and it would make him throw up. That was some of the side effects. Plus, like reading too long or watching, like using too much of your eyesight created migraines and headaches and that too. We're like, maybe he overdid it and just needs to rest. But I guess, so he was throwing up the night before, and I didn't know it until the morning of. And that morning at like 9 a.m., my dad took him into the hospital the morning of my wedding. And so my brother goes into the hospital. My dad calls. I'm taking a shower. So I was taking a shower. My mom like barges in, and I was like, get out of here. Like, obviously the curtain was shut and everything, but still somebody bombarded into the bathroom with the door opened. And my mom's like, your dad needs to talk to you. And she was like bawling. She could barely say that to me. And I'm like, what in good Lord is happening? Like, I thought somebody died. Like, it was bad. And it was my dad. And he's like, well, I have some bad news. So here I am standing naked in the shower with a phone, like a house, like landline phone, mind you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like, what is it? And my dad was like, your brother's going to be in the hospital for a while. And I go, what's wrong? Like, okay, what, I'm trying to like think, and I'm like, okay, what's the problem? What's happening? What's going on? He's like, well, your brother is in the hospital. It looks like he needs to get surgery. He has appendicitis. He's like, I don't know what time they're going to get him in for surgery, and I'll have to call you back because I don't know if I'll be back or not for the wedding. And so I know this is horrifying. My brother has to get surgery. I don't know how bad it is. My dad might not be there. My mom is a mess, and I'm just standing there naked in a shower. Great way to start your wedding day. Yeah. Even professionals can have problems, I will say.
Yeah.
So this is why my one advice is something can go wrong that you can't control. This is my one thing. Well, two things that went wrong that I couldn't control: the weather and family sickness. So, of course I'm upset. So I'm like, I call my mom back because there's like nothing immediately for me to put the phone down. So I just like, Mom, she was outside the door crying still. So I handed her back the phone, and my dad said that he called to give us an update so we knew more information. And I said, like, before I hung up, and I was like, I love you, tell him I love him. And I go, I want you to be at my wedding. So, if we can maybe have a family member or like my aunt who's a nurse or somebody that's not immediately my parents there and present, so that I can at least get married and, have somebody be there. So if something happened to my brother, somebody would be there with him because I didn't want him to be alone, even if he was in surgery. I was like, if we can at least do that, like, just please tell me, because if not, I will put my wedding on hold. Like, I was willing to, like, maybe we just start with a cocktail party, and then whenever we get married is whenever my dad got home. Like, I have no idea, but we had 150 people coming and I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
So my dad called me later. It was about like 11 o'clock. So I was already out of the shower, and I was getting like my hair prepped and my basics of my makeup started. But we were about to go to a nail salon and then come back and get like finished up pretty much. Because my friends did my hair and makeup because I have awesome vendor friends. And so my dad called, I think it was about 11:30, and he's like, hey, he's like, I have an update. Your brother has appendicitis. His appendix could burst at any time. They told him he cannot leave the hospital because your brother's insisting on leaving the hospital because he doesn't want anything to stop him from being there, which is the sweetest thing ever. But he's like, your brother's appendix could burst, and in 5 to 10 minutes, he'd be dead if he can't get immediate help. And I'm like, well, there's no way in hell he's leaving that hospital then. Right. Like, that's not worth risking it. Like, it's not life or death to be at my wedding. And so it was just like, how can we still salvage and make this wedding happening while people are in the hospital the morning of it, and it's family. It's like my brother. I love him so much. He was going to be standing in our party, he was going to be a part of our ceremony. And it's just like, okay, let's figure some shiz out. And so we called in my dad's friends. We served them all beer while they figured out how to, figure out arranging parking, because that was my dad's task. And they put yard signs out and like signs on the roads, people could find the place. That was his other task. And my mom tried keeping it together, but it was hard, just with all the emotions anyways of a wedding day, but plus because your son is in the hospital and could die. It's horrifying. So my brother's surgery was scheduled the same time I was to walk down the aisle. So 4 p.m. I know. 4 p.m. my brother was getting surgery on his appendix. 4 p.m. is when I was walking down the aisle. And it's like, you're walking down the aisle and you have this hanging over your head of like, is my brother going to be okay? Is everything going to be all right? And you're also like trying to enjoy this moment of like marrying the person you love. And so like, it was hot. That was a big ball of emotions that day. I totally have a really great group of girls, my best friends, that like, they just got me a little tipsy while we were getting our nails done. And we're like, it's okay. Just let it all out now. We'll get you prettied up. And we're just still going to have fun regardless of whatever happens today happens. And that's great that you have people by you that can do that. And it happened. It worked out. My dad, we were able to have a family friend go. It wasn't my aunt, but it was a family friend. Because when they're in surgery, there's nothing you can do but wait. And I was like, if I can have you be there, because I told my dad, I am not walking down that aisle until you are here. However long that is, I will freaking wait. Like, not to be a bridezilla, but I refused to not have that moment with my father. That meant a lot to me. So it worked out where like an hour before the ceremony, my dad got home. He quickly showered. He tried to do some stuff last minute because he had a very specific plan because it was at their property. And then he headed over to our neighbor's property, which is where the ceremony was, in a beautiful barn that they restored. And he showed up very, very much on time, like 3:50.
Ready to go.
Across the road to be able to come over to see me and to see his daughter and to walk me down the aisle. And we had the ceremony. After the ceremony, we found out my brother, it was like about an hour after the ceremony. So it's like ceremony happened and then we saw the family and hugs and love. And we had to kind of tell people why my brother wasn't there. And we found out like an hour afterwards that my brother's surgery was successful. He was safe, but he was like out of it because of the anesthesia. So that was good. I know my parents just enjoyed themselves because they're like, my brother was going to be pretty much out of it all night. So, they kept calling the doctors to get updates and knowing that he was okay and just resting, and just they knocked him out with some medication and the anesthesiology. So my parents were able to stay and enjoy the wedding, the reception and the whole evening, which I'm really glad because I feel like we all extra celebrated, knowing that my brother was safe. And after all that stress, you just want to enjoy life and enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
And so that's my horror story. On my wedding day, I got to see my brother the next day, and I know he was just so worried about, like, he will probably say this to this day, and it's a little personal, but he's like, he always feels like he always worries that he ruined our wedding day. And I said, nothing could have ruined my wedding day. And I just was sad that he wasn't there with us to witness it, because for him, it was like it never happened. We unfortunately didn't do video, and I really wish we did. Like, I had 3 people there with, I don't know why somebody didn't video, to be honest, as like a bride. Just like, I wish somebody would have thought of that for us and just did it. Like, be our photographers, or like the family members that actually had like video recorders on them. Like, the one thing to record would be our ceremony, and they didn't. So it's just like, it would have been really great if somebody would have just thought of that and did that for us without having to ask or think, because by that time your brain just hurts and you're just trying to make the best of a horrifying situation. So,
oh yeah,
that's my personal wedding horror story.
Oh man, I don't have anything like that. Sorry.
I know. Yeah, it's very stressful. It's very stressful. And I think it's in current times, like, people are going to the hospital, people are testing positive for COVID. Like, COVID could easily affect somebody's wedding day. And it's like, I think it's up to us to decide how we're going to handle that, and be prepared for any scenario to happen, but also know, like, it's up to you to let it affect you or not, or to bother you. And I'm not saying bury your emotions, because, obviously I had to put a little bit of my feelings aside, because was I upset? Of course you're upset. When your family member that you really wanted there is not there, you're going to be upset and you're going to miss them. But the important thing is that he was safe, he was healthy, he didn't pass away, because if his appendix bursted at the wedding, that would have been even worse.
Yeah.
Would have been horrifying. Like, the chance of losing my brother, no way. It's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It would never be worth it.
Right.
And so it's just like, things are going to be out of your control, and you have to be okay with that. You have to know that sometimes the stars are going to align and your wedding day is going to be perfect and so smooth. And you also have to embrace the fact that that is not life. Life is not perfect or smooth. So you may face every single challenge possible and still get married, and it's going to make your marriage that much stronger, because you conquered it. You were able to deal with it or address it or conquer it head on. Be it weather or sickness or crazy people, like crazy vendors. Yeah, any of it.
Oh yeah.
So, sorry, that was a little bit of a long story, but that's my wedding crazy story.
Dang. I only have cringy stories. Sorry.
It's like, on that note.
Wasn't that fun, guys? Wasn't that fun?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't even think, I think like the closest thing I even have is like somebody had to have their reception shut down early because people brought in their own alcohol. Like, you can't do that. Like, that's it. And that's not anywhere near equivalent to.
No, it is still horrifying though. Your wedding gets shut down because people brought their own booze. So if you're in a venue or you have a bartender that has their own liquor license, there can't be any other alcohol present that's being served by other people. So they had to shut them down probably.
Yep. And I think like the couple got charged a fine, and you're like, great. And all because somebody, instead of wanting to have like the nice alcohol that was there, they wanted to bring in like Natty Light. And you're like,
Wait a
great.
minute, all of that for Natty Light.
Yep.
What? I was expecting like little liquor bottles or something. That's
Nope.
usually what people are like, oh, there's no liquor. I'm going to bring my own and bring like a little mini shooter bottles. And you'll find them later at the end of the night. Like, okay, who did it?
Yep. Nope. That did not happen.
That sucks.
Yeah.
Wedding insurance, guys. Wedding insurance.
Wedding insurance. But yeah, like stuff like that is like, those stories happen, I think, all the time. And not like at every single wedding, of course.
Oh, no.
In any way. But yeah, like I think especially when it comes to like COVID, I think a lot of couples have experienced something similar to like what you've experienced, in like that their weddings have had to decrease in size so much. You have that cringy feeling of having to uninvite people that you've originally invited.
Mm-hmm.
You have family members who are no longer coming because like they can't be exposed, or they have been exposed. Like even at my brother's wedding this past September, his best man tested positive a week before the wedding.
Ooh.
And he tested positive. He had gone to a wedding apparently the week before that was only 12 people. And you're like, well, did we take the proper precautions? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that one, nor should I have the answer to that one. But like now all of a sudden you're not being a best man for my brother, and my brother definitely could have used that support. And he was still able to like be a part of the wedding. He actually recorded a speech, and that DJ is awesome. DJ Adam Freeman. We've talked to him before. He's super cool. But he was able to play that in lieu of like, his best man having a speech. And it was still really nicely done, but you're like, do I wish that Cody, the best man, was there? Yeah, absolutely. Would have made life a little bit simpler. Did they work it out? Yep, sure did. But like, I know that me personally, like I really wanted to be there for my brother, as you know. So I was taking extra precautions the entire time.
Yeah.
To make sure that I could be there. Cause like, yeah, like that whole, like, I totally understand how your brother feels. Like me not being at my brother's wedding, I would have felt devastated.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be devastating.
I mean, different reasons. I would have just been quarantined.
In a way he was, just in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
My poor brother. Yeah, I've always talked about wanting to do a vow renewal so that he could be a part of that. We missed it for a 5-year because we have 6 years now. So I was like, maybe for a 10-year anniversary, that's something that I personally would like to do. Just because it's just like, man, life.
Yeah. Well, especially at that point too, like if you had him kind of like up there as like makeshift officiant for you, now he could be a part of it. That would be really fun.
Yeah. So the day of our wedding, it was my plan. It was a bad plan, but it was my plan to save my vows that I wrote on paper. So I like folded up into a little tiny piece of paper and like shoved it down my dress because you have no pockets.
Yeah.
Again, time. Later, I put that said little piece of paper somewhere very well that I couldn't find it. Still to this day, I cannot find it. I swore I like hid it in a cupboard at my parents' house. I still can't find it.
And it's probably still there somewhere in a cabinet somewhere.
It's probably somewhere buried. In 1 year, we're going to find it. But I was looking for it because I wanted to save my exact vows so I can read the same exact vows again to my husband. And we have his vows because, he's got pockets, but I don't know where mine went. And you know what? It's not about reading the same words, even though that was sentimental for me. I would like to, but I'm like, you know what? I can rewrite my vows into something new because time changes so much, but it doesn't at the same time. So
yeah,
there might be a lot more challenges we face that we want to talk about or address for each other.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so there's some spooky, scary stories for you.
Yes, yes. And I will say too, especially like with the way how this year has gone, I don't think there's so very few things that could honestly surprise me at this point.
Oh, absolutely. I know we both personally haven't had this, but I know I've heard in different groups of like vendor horror stories where vendors don't show up or vendors like lost images and stuff like that. So I'm curious if anybody else has any crazy stories. If you want to send us your crazy stories, feel free to do so. I feel like this is a whole nother chain of crazy category, which we talked about could be its whole other thing, but we do like to try to keep our wedding planning positive. But this was like our ode to all the scary stuff that happens for weddings that we thought we would talk about for Halloween.
All that fun stuff. But yeah, so not to worry because next week we are changing up everything. Because next week we're talking all about like holiday preparation. And
Yeah.
friendly reminder, you need to vote on November 3rd. So we're talking about that stuff, holiday preparation fun stuff, which is completely different than Halloween.
Yeah. It's like from spooky to happy.
Yes.
Big transition, y'all.
But we will talk to you all next week, and we hope that you have a wonderful Halloween.
Happy Halloween.